I never thought a simple attempt to leave my own driveway would spiral into one of the most surreal confrontations of my life. But the moment I stepped outside that scorching afternoon, briefcase in hand, tie slightly loosened from the heat, I froze at the sight of a hulking black SUV parked sideways across my driveway, sealing me in like a prisoner in my own home. And leaning casually against the vehicle with arms folded and sunglasses perched arrogantly on his face was the HOA so-called security guard, a man notorious in the neighborhood for his inflated ego and petty harassment. And when I asked him firmly yet calmly to move his car, he smirked like a villain in a bad movie and said, "Sorry, sir, new HOA policy. No one leaves until we verify compliance." His tone dripping with sarcasm and fake authority, as if he were the sheriff of some lawless town. And instantly, my stomach sank with frustration, because I was already running late for an emergency hearing at court, the kind of session where every minute mattered. But this man, puffed up with self-importance, was determined to play gatekeeper. So I tried reasoning, telling him I had urgent business, but he cut me off with a chuckle, saying, "Rules are rules. Nobody's above the HOA, not even you." And in that moment, something inside me snapped, because I knew for a fact there was no such rule, no such policy, just a power-hungry guard using his position to bully residents. And as he leaned closer, whispering like he enjoyed the confrontation, "If you try to maneuver around my vehicle, I'll have your car towed and fine you for reckless driving." I felt my patience evaporate, my heartbeat pounding in my ears, yet instead of exploding, I forced myself to remain calm, my face unreadable. And that's when I reached into my pocket, pulled out my leather wallet, and slowly flipped it open to reveal the one card he never expected to see. My official judge's identification, state-issued, gold-lettered, and unmistakable. And the transformation on his face was almost cinematic, the smug grin collapsing into wide-eyed panic, his lips parting soundlessly as the blood drained from his cheeks. And for the first time since I'd known him, he looked small, fragile even, like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar, stammering, "You're a judge?" As if saying the word out loud would somehow make it less real. But I leaned forward just slightly, letting the silence stretch, before replying in a measured, deliberate voice, "Yes, and what you're doing right now, illegally blocking my driveway, preventing me from leaving, and threatening me with baseless fines, isn't just an abuse of authority, it's unlawful detainment." And I could see his hands shake as he fumbled with his keys, desperate to undo the mess he had just created, nearly dropping them on the pavement in his rush to move the SUV, while neighbors who had been peeking through their curtains now began to step outside, curious about the commotion, whispering to each other as they realized the neighborhood tyrant was finally being put in his place. And as he scrambled to slide into the driver's seat, I wasn't ready to let him escape without consequences. So I raised my voice loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear and said, "Abusing authority isn't just unethical, it's dangerous. And people who misuse their power to intimidate others often end up standing in front of a judge, not hiding behind a false title." And the irony hung heavy in the air, neighbors nodding in agreement, some even chuckling quietly, while the guard, now drenched in sweat despite the mild breeze, backed his SUV away with jerky, awkward movements, parking it haphazardly down the street, his entire swagger gone, replaced by shame and fear. And though I could have driven off then, I decided to make the lesson permanent. So before leaving, I walked up to his window and said quietly but firmly, "You'll be hearing from the HOA board, and I'll be filing a formal report with local authorities. Because this isn't just about me, it's about every person you've harassed here." And the look on his face told me he knew his little reign of terror was over. So I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away to court, my pulse finally slowing, yet a strange satisfaction filling my chest. Because for once justice had been served not with a gavel, but with a simple flash of truth. And later that week, when I returned from work, I found the entire neighborhood buzzing with gossip. Neighbors stopping me on my evening walk to thank me, telling me stories of how he had threatened to fine them for leaving trash cans out too. Long-haired elderly residents they'd be cited for parking guests in the wrong spots. Even told children they couldn't ride bikes on the sidewalk without security approval. And the more I heard, the angrier I became, realizing just how many people had silently endured his tyranny. But what made it all worthwhile was the letter slipped into every resident's mailbox a few days later. An official notice from the HOA board announcing that the security guard had been terminated effective immediately, and that the HOA would be reviewing new protocols to prevent abuses of power in the future. And when I read the final line, which included a formal apology for the distress caused to residents, I couldn't help but smile, because not only had justice prevailed, but a community that once kept to itself was suddenly united. Neighbors who barely waved before, now stopping to chat, bonding over shared relief. And as for the guard, I later heard from a friend on the board that he tried to beg for his job back, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. But the board was unmoved, his arrogance having finally cost him everything. And though some might say I was harsh, I believe moments like these matter, because power unchecked becomes dangerous, and authority without accountability is nothing more than tyranny. And as I reflected on that day, on his face freezing in, shock as my ID caught the sunlight, I realized the poetic justice of it all, that a man who built his fragile empire on intimidation was undone not by force or anger, but by a calm reminder of true authority, the kind that serves people instead of crushing them. And in that instant, I knew I hadn't just freed my own driveway. I had reminded an entire neighborhood what real justice looks like. And that, to me, was worth every second of the confrontation.